So the question is,
personal
how is my mental health?
Thank you, yes.
Well, that's not what I thought the topic was today. No. I've just spent the last 2 years living inside the lack of mental health online. I initiated the research because, how long do we have?
A couple minutes.
I'm a writer and a journalist, and communication has been my life. I've worked a lot for literacy programs because I couldn't think of a fate worse than not being able to understand what other people were saying, not be able to read. When the internet came along, I thought, this has got to be the greatest thing ever invented, and it is. However, it has also become an incredible environment for torturing each other. I knew that, but then I found a serial killer. Her name's Karla Homolka. There was very strong evidence online that she had left Canada and had relocated somewhere in the Caribbean. But what I was hearing back from my sources is that she was in fact spending time with young women the same age as the ones that she had helped Paul Bernardo kidnap, torture, and kill. And we'd washed our hands of her in Canada. We let her go. She did her 12 years as part of that plea bargain, and we let her go without any stipulations on reporting or behavior. And if you have a job as a journalist and you actually take it seriously, I thought somebody should go and check if we dumped a problem on somebody else. It's up to Canadians to decide what you want to do about it, but somebody needs to find out if there are potentially more young girls in trouble. And I set off, I managed to find her, I spent about an hour with her, I wrote it up in a book, and I came back, and it was a controversial journey. There were some people who said, you should have just left her alone, you know, she's gone, let's forget about her, she's not, as long as she's not in Canada, what do we care? And I expected that controversy, and I welcomed it, because that's what we do. When we communicate, we're allowed to have new ideas, we're allowed to share ideas, we're allowed to debate ideas. But then the strangest thing happened. I've been on television for years and years and years, and when you're on TV, you're a lightning bolt. People say the nicest things you don't deserve, and they say the meanest things you especially, you think, don't deserve. But I wasn't prepared for the level of sympathy for a serial killer. Into my mailbox, my email box, came emails so vicious, words I can't say. I mean, if you've been online, you know the level of violence, you know the misogyny, you know the words that we would never say to describe ourselves as women. I was getting those kinds of emails. Kill yourself. You should have left her alone. Poor Karla Homolka. Who do you think you are? And on and on and on. And then one day came an email that described how I would be killed, I would be cut up, I would have my organs pulled out, and it was so horrible, I thought, you know, who are these people? We're told that anonymity is the reason people are so mean online. That didn't make sense to me. I know lots of people who are online and we're not mean at all. I know lots of people who do anonymous things, very, very kind things, and nobody ever gets to know or thank them. So I went on a very long investigation. And over the course of 2 years, what I discovered is that mental illness is one of the leading motivations for people to use the internet as a weapon rather than as a tool. And the kinds of mental illness that are more likely to propel us forward, to vent online, to target online, to stalk, harass, and just generally cyber abuse was a massive eye-opener. So I've spent the last 2 years, believe it or not, feeling some empathy for the people who are struggling online, and I now think that cyber abuse, and there's many, many other reasons that it's occurring. There are many other motivations, I should say, that drive people there. But mental health is one of the leading reasons we're living in the digital environment we currently are. And until we recognize that we've got people out there suffering so much that they have to go onto the internet, we need to help. And the more we help, the better the internet's going to get for the rest of us.
Thank you, Paula. Mark, I know you have a very personal story that you speak so eloquently about. Tell us a little bit about your history with mental health.
Sure. growing up in a small town, it's often difficult to really express just about anything to anybody without the rest of the town finding out. So in that case, when I started to feel very sad, I figured, this is just something that's appropriate for my age. That's what my family keeps telling me. But then when I realized that it was something more, that I couldn't seem to get happy, I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to face the bullies who were harassing me every day, really. When I started to realize that, I said, okay, there's something going on here. So I can get that in myself. But what happens now? So in fact, that's actually what ended up making me suffer more, was knowing that I know that I need help. I know that I can't do this on my own. But where do I get it? How do I do it? How do I get that help that I need? So that ended up culminating, really, that pressure on me into several suicide attempts throughout my high school years. And then subsequently, not being able to talk about those, the stigma really compounding my illness, making me worse. It was though when I learned that I could speak up, when I learned that I actually could share my story, and that might help others, that then helped me recover too. And that's the journey that I've been on since, is really sharing my story, I mean for others, but for me too.
It's helpful too, yeah. Rona, what about you?
When I was a busy young working mother, I couldn't stand being me for one more day. And that is when I entered therapy for depression. It worked so quickly, it was like crossing over from a fuzzy black and white world into light and color. And I thought, wow, so this is what life can be. I can dream, I can make plans. I can even have some fun. Up to that point, I had been living half a life. And every day felt like climbing uphill through sand. I grew up in a house of secrets. There are lots of families like mine. Alcoholic father, angry mother, padlocks on everyone's tongue. It was absolutely not okay to talk about what was going on. A nagging negative voice began harassing me, saying, "You're not good enough, your needs don't matter, you will never be happy." Depression poisoned times that could have been happy, like becoming a mother. I remember terrifying fantasies in which I threw my darling baby out the window. And I was overcome with guilt. I thought I must be the worst, most undeserving mother in the world. Of course, I didn't tell a soul. I got really good at putting up a front. I made a name, made my deadlines, made my own pasta from scratch, none of that boxed stuff for my family. But I kept seeing a bathtub and a razor blade, a bathtub and a razor blade. Meanwhile, my friend Chris was diagnosed with cancer. They gave her 3 years to live. And I thought, if there was any justice in the world, I would be the one with cancer. Well, it struck me, I did have cancer. Cancer of the soul, because that's what depression is. And I couldn't trade places with Chris. I did know that my suicide would devastate my family. It was time to get a life. So I called a mental health clinic and I said the hardest words that I had ever spoken. I need help. Therapy was my bridge to the world. It helped me to invest myself fully in this world, not just 50%. That's what made it possible for me to aim higher. And when I got to the top job at Chatelaine, I made it part of my mission to help break the silence around mental illness, to reach out to those 50%ers. I told my story in an editorial. The floodgates opened. One reader sent me a watercolor painting of spring flowers with a note that said, "Your story gave me hope." I never thought I'd say this, but you know, depression has been a great teacher. It's taught me compassion. It's taught me courage. It's taught me to celebrate the shining moments in every day, because they are there, and they do keep me well. It has taught me that the most painful silence can be broken, and that those who are living half a life can commit their full selves to this world. Out of that silence, we can make a song, and we can all sing it. And when other people hear it, they'll get the courage to sing it too.
That's such an amazing image. And padlocks on our tongues is something that which is also such a visceral image, and it's so true that often is how people approach mental health discussions, and I'm so glad that we're breaking that silence today. Anne, let's hear from you.
Yes.
Speaking of breaking silence.
All right.
Your book's fabulous.
Thank you. I grew up in a household with a beautiful mother and an absent father. My father was always in Africa or another country, and I grew up with a mother who always had the blinds pulled, who had 3 little children, and she lived on the couch. She suffered from profound mental health issues, and she medicated it with alcohol. I grew up from the time I was 2 or 3 years old with this story, and her beautiful life devolved extraordinarily over 30 years to a classic Betty Ford story of mixing Valium with cocktails, and she had what we call a very low bottom. It was a very hard thing to be her eldest daughter, and we grew up in a privileged house with great paintings on the walls, and we were not allowed to tell anyone what was happening. That was my story, and if there was one thing I never wanted to be, was an alcoholic. I headed off to university with great aspirations to be a journalist, and I had a wonderful 30-year career, probably best known for starting the Maclean's ranking of Canadian universities. And I had a bully pulpit on higher education and reinvesting in higher education in this country, and a supreme joy becoming vice principal of McGill University. And exactly when my professional life was at its crescendo, I was haunted and revisited by something that had arrived first when I was 11 in South Africa, which was crippling depression. And I had outfoxed, outsmarted depression my entire life, mostly working with therapists and with walking, exercise, and so on. I hit my 50s, and I was unable to outfox it. And I dealt with it not with pills because of the Valium, I was too afraid. I dealt with alcohol. I self-medicated. I did not, like my mother, miss whole days. I did not miss work. In fact, I showed up at work, and I was rewarded at work, and I won awards at work. 5 national magazine awards, gold ones. I did very, very well, and inside I was dying. I was dying, and I was coming home, and that glass of wine that was one at the chopping board while I was getting ready for an evening overseeing my son's homework turned to 2, and the 2 turned to 3. A couple of years ago, now sober, having been to rehab, I realized that I was one of many women, and I began to do an Atkinson Fellowship on women and drinking, and realized 2 profound things. Number one, while men were slowing down in the world, in the developed world, women were not. And in fact, it was the professional, educated woman who was not slowing down. That was interesting. What was also interesting was marketing to women, what I call the pinking of the market. You've seen the products, Girls Night Out wine, Skinny Girl vodka, and I began to do research that put 2 and 2 together, and I realized that I was not alone. A year ago, my book Drink came out, and it was, there isn't a day that passes when I don't receive an email from a reader who says, I have changed my life because of your book. It's been the most rewarding thing of my life. And I am now on a crusade to talk about what is really a difficult and prohibited subject, which is the connection between mental health and drinking. The self-medication that goes on, women tend to drink alone. We isolate, we medicate, but it isn't gender specific. It's something that affects us all, and I'm sure if I asked you all to raise your hands if you've been touched by anyone's drinking or self-medication because of concurrent disorders, every single one of you would have a friend, a family member, and know of someone. So I'm coming at this stigma from 2 sides, looking at both mental health and the addictive connection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your book. I mean, you've all made such amazing contributions and clearly have helped so many people's lives. So I want to know for us, because we could talk about this all afternoon, but quickly tell us what is something that we can do as individuals to seek help, or for someone, for a loved one, for a colleague, for a friend? What's the best advice you can give us, starting with you, Mark?
Well, it's not that hard. I mean, we think that it's so scary just to ask somebody how they're doing, you know? And to actually really want to know how they're doing. That can actually make a huge difference in somebody's life. I know when I was struggling, if somebody had have just asked me the question, because I was on the verge of killing myself. And if somebody had have said, are you thinking about killing yourself? That could have changed everything. I could have said yes. That would have given me permission to actually engage with them. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the challenging parts, of course, is that we're always afraid of what people will say. I mean, in suicide intervention, one of the first rules is to be direct. You don't want to hedge around. You don't want to say, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you sad? Are you depressed? You need to be direct and ask them what they're planning to do. And that's because people find all kinds of ways, I certainly did, of lying to themselves about what they're going through. We need to. We need to protect ourselves that way. So I think that our role, both on this panel and in this room and everywhere else, is to really reach out to people, to make a meaningful connection with them, not to be afraid of that vulnerability that they're going to bring to the table. I think now, reflecting back, I wish I had have given myself that advice when I was 15 years old, standing on the edge of a bridge. But now I have a great opportunity. This Saturday, my son is going to be turning 1 year old.
Wow.
And I can now look at him and see how far I've come. I can think back and at least in my thoughts, tell my 15-year-old self, you don't have to kill yourself. You don't have to. That can make all the difference.
Everyone wants to be seen and heard. 2 very simple things that happen so seldom. When my friend Linda was a student, she was waiting for a bus one day, and she saw a young man come along, a fellow student she didn't know. He was agitated. His shoulders were hunched. She engaged him in conversation. She listened to him. She treated him as if he mattered. The bus came and went. Years later, Linda found out that this man had been thinking of killing himself. He was very close to the edge. And he met Linda again, and he was able to tell her, you saved my life. You saved my life. She didn't even know. Every day, we have opportunities to bring a little lightness into someone's life, and we can take them. My working principle now is that every day I want to do 2 things. I want to give something, and I want to receive something. And I want to reflect on what those things are.
Paula or Anne?
It is an easy suggestion that if you are being upset by what you're seeing online, that you get offline. I think that we have a massive problem with the amount of digital garbage we are exposed to every day. And it's more than an instinct. Research is showing us now from around the world that it isn't just the target of cyber abuse, and it isn't just the bully or the harasser or tormentor or sexual extortionist, which, by the way, if you try to harm somebody online, it hurts you, it turns out, statistically, even more than it's going to hurt your target. Those people are obviously well within the torture that can occur online. But the new research shows us it's affecting each and every one of us. The more we are exposed to the abuse online, the deeper our depressions become, the more likely we are to turn to substance and abuse, the more trouble we will have at school and at work. I look at not just young people, but I also look at the damage that's being done to adults online. But the idea that we should all just shut down our social media accounts, stop using the internet, is absolutely unworkable. One, it's impractical. Two, if you're worried about your kids, you're not going to get them offline. And three, why should we be the ones to go? Isn't it more likely that we need online to set a tone that not only can be of assistance to the people who are coming online because of mental health challenges, along with a wide variety of other aggressions and strains and stresses that push people to be cyber abusers? We need to be online to set a good example. And it's actually pretty easy, it turns out. The latest research shows us that traditional bullying, which is punching each other, and I know you went through a lot of this as well, that traditional bullying in the schoolyard, that might culminate in a fight at recess with a circle of bystanders, is obviously going to be very problematic, and the bystanders can contribute to the problem by simply staying there or cheering somebody on. But guess what? New research also shows us cyber bystanders, that's each and every one of us, does far more damage than a traditional bystander. And that means the flip side, we have way more power online than we realize. So if this is hurting us, we don't want to give up this amazing tool, and we know that we can be the beginning of ending abuse. Why would we do it? Easy first steps, there's lots more. There isn't time. But easy first steps, stop sharing something that humiliates others. Stop liking it. Every time you do that, you exponentially increase the bullying. And the other thing is, dangerous idea, when you encounter a tormentor or a harasser, a cyber abuser, whether it's your kids or whether it's you in the workplace, take a way big minute to think, what's wrong with that person? Because cyber abuse isn't about you. Cyber abuse tells you nothing about how fat you are, how thin you are, how smart you are, how accomplished. It tells you nothing. It tells you only about the person on the other side. So I'm out here to say we need to stay online. We need to get smarter about what we do. And we need to realize that the internet abuse may be the greatest moral possibility we have ever had to decide what kind of world we really want to live in. And the flip side of the trouble is that the internet gives us the capacity to reach out right across the world to do that.
Thank you, Paula. And we only have time for one more comment, but I would like to hear from you something that perhaps a nugget of advice that people can use if they're facing mental health challenges that affect them personally, that are affecting their performance at work, professionally, perhaps.
Right. I think that we have done a wonderful job in terms of beginning to open the dialogue about mental health. We have, and I speak at a lot of campuses, and young people know the signs of mental health trouble. They often don't know the signs of concurrent disorders. They often don't know that, for instance, alcohol fuzzies not only medication, but diagnosis. We often don't expand the conversation to include all sorts of concurrent disorders. So I think that we've heard about communication today, and that is important. 5 years ago, a group of friends got together and said to me, how can we help? And I said, help me get to Sunnybrook Hospital. I was suffering from a major depression. I think we have all talked about that kind of openness, but we have not talked about stigma. And the stigma is still enormous. It's incumbent upon us, and I think the many voices of National Speakers Bureau to open the conversation, spread the conversation, and make sure that we're heard.
Thank you, and we certainly heard all of your words today. Thank you, big round of applause for our panel, Mark, Rona, Anne, Paula. Such amazing work that they're doing, so thank you so much, and I hope you all continue the conversation. Thank you.